Right, welcome back, ladies and gents. It's your boy Rocco Yaps. Today we have another prediction video. Uh, for the anticipated replacement matchup between Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. Now, currently, as I'm filming this video and I'm posting it, is gonna be the day before, so it's December the 18th. And yeah, um, I'm excited for this matchup in the sense of just seeing an absolute crazy, devastating KO. We'll get into that, but from the you know how these go, predictions from the very first match of the night all the way up to the main. Let's get it going. Now, this is the very first fight of the night. Per usual, first fight is not really that appealing, but as I stated before in previous videos, predicting, this is how fighters come up in the fight game, and this is how every superstar has ever started their career. Whether they were big in the amateurs or they weren't big in the amateurs, they all start the same. So, with that being said, first fight of the night is a pro debut from Keno Marley fighting a two and one Davis Jr. Davis Jr. has a record of just 2 wins, one via KO, and then one loss, 0 draws. Uh, his first fight, he wins it. Second one, he loses it, and now we're here, and I don't know. There's nothing much to say about this fight. I'm sorry if I'm drawing a blank. I'm just trying to, I'm doing a lot of stuff, but yeah. With that being said, like all these slides, they're gonna have descriptions. I'm gonna mention like the achievements of the fighters just to give you an idea of the level and caliber of each person and each opponent that's gonna be in every single one of these fights. And as you can see, this one there's not much. One of them is barely starting his career, and the other one, he won his first fight, lost his second fight, then his third fight he wins it by KO, and that was 4 months ago. And now he's fighting again against the guy debuting his very first professional fight. Now, this is a cruiserweight belt, so it's at the 200-pound limit. You can't pass or exceed 200 pounds, as they say. And I have a 65% chance for Davis Jr., solely based off the experience. Marley and Davis don't have much of an amateur record that you could say, oh, Marley could possibly come and put the whooping on Davis because, oh, he was an Olympic champion, or he went to the Olympics, or he was 300 fights in the amateurs, went to world tournaments, stuff like that. None of them have it. So we're talking about a guy who does have 3 fights under his belt. 2 of them he won, and one of them is by knockout, compared to a guy that hasn't shown us anything in the professional fight. So yeah. Second fight of the night, we have I'm sorry if I pronounce his wrong name, but Avius Griffin versus Justin Cardona. Griffin is sitting at a 17 victories, 16 by KOs, 1 defeat, and 0 draws. So as you can see, it's obviously that Griffin is a very hard puncher. And Cardona is sitting at a 10-win fight, 5 via knockout, and 1 loss with 0 draws. So he has a 50% knockout ratio compared to I'm pretty sure it's like a fucking 96%, like around there, 96% chance for Griffin. Um, you know, the only thing that's like that, doing my research for this, um, Cardona, this is his first fight at 147. As you can see, it's a welterweight bout, so the limit is 147. Cardona has never fought at 147. He would typically stay around the 130, 135 range. Sometimes he would have fights like at 132 or 136, but this is the first time he's ever jumped and fought at 147. So, there's that. He did fight, I think his heaviest was 142. I believe I saw one of his fights had that. So, but yeah, but debuting at 147. Um, this is an eighth round bout for Griffin's title, who is, as I put it right here, the WBC USA champion. That is his kind of like only um, like accomplishment. He doesn't have real victories on him in the sense that you would say like, oh, that's a good name to have or something like that. He doesn't have any of those. So his biggest accomplishment today is having the WBC USA Championship belt and defending it. I think he will be defending it for the second or third time against Cardona. So he not only has that belt, but he's already felt what it's like to defend it against a fighter at least one time. But yeah, there's nothing much. And Griffin is a natural 147. He same thing with these guys. Sometimes they have fights that are random weights, like fighting at 150, fighting at 144 or 145. But consistently now, Griffin has been in his last like 6, 7 fights. Not, not no pun intended. But yeah, he's consistently being on 147. And like I said earlier, Cardona is not a guy who's a natural at the weight class. He's actually for the first time fighting there. So that's why I have a 70% chance of Griffin beating Cardona. You just got a guy who hits really hard, a guy who has a little bit more experience, a little slightly bigger caliber than Cardona's opponents, and someone who has a title that lets him know at the very least what level he is at, which is the WBC USA level. Now moving on to the third fight of the night, we have Yokasta Vale at 33 fights, uh, 33 wins, 10 by knockout, 3 losses, 0 draws, facing off against Yadira Bustillos at 11 wins, 2 via knockout, 1 loss, and 0 draws. This will be for the WBC Strawweight World Championship belt, which is the 106-pound division for the women. Um, Starting off with the long list, we're gonna be at Vale's accomplishments. She first became IBF World Atom Champion. Then she became WBO World Light Fly Champion. So that was her first championship, a world championship fight, and belt that she ever got. Then she became WBC Interim Minimum Champion. She defended. Well, she became IBF World Minimum Champion, and then she defended it quite a bit, like a pretty decent amount, pretty fuck ton amount of defense. Then she became IBF and WBO World Minimum Champion. Then she became IBF, WBO, and WBC World Minimum Champion. And currently is the WBC World Minimum Champion. So I don't know the politics as to why those other two belts, talking about the IBF and WBO, why those two belts are no longer in her position. In her position. Are no longer with her. They're no longer hers. But she is currently the WBC. I say straw weight, but others say minimum weight. You know how it is in boxing. Different names for different categories. Depends who you are. But she is the WBC 106-pound world champion. She's facing against Bustillas, whose only accomplishments are being WBC interim minimum challenger, but she lost that fight. And then she became World Boxing Foundation, so the WBF, just a small organization to kind of give people a stepping stool to the actual bigger belts. She became their champ. And then, that's about it. Now she's here facing against the WBC World Champion. I think it's going to be a split decision victory in favor of Vale. 70% chance of winning. I just think that she just has way too much fucking experience, especially dealing with world champion contenders and other people that were world champions. I think there's just too much experience, too much fucking, in her favor as compared to Bustillos, whose only thing I have is that she's pretty fast, both her feet and hands. But it's like there's nothing Bali hasn't seen. So, I just think it's just too much experience and a slight amount of pop that could be enough, like in her power, to kind of just get a comfortable unanimous decision victory. And even if it gets ugly, I still see Vale winning pretty comfortably. 70% chance as it says. But yeah. So moving on to the fourth fight of the night, we have I hope I'm saying it right, but Cherneka Johnson at 18 victories, 8 by via knockout, 2 losses and 0 draws, versus Amanda Gale, who has 12 victories, one of those victories by knockout, 0 losses and 1 draw. So she is an undefeated fighter coming into this fight. This is a 10-round bout, because for those who don't know, women's rules are a little different than men's. Even though they're fighting for a world championship level fight, there's a world championship belts. It is only the maximum is 10 rounds for them, and their rounds, instead of being 3 minutes long, they're 2 minutes long. So it's a 10-round fight. This is for undisputed in the bantam world championship weight class for women. So with that being said, I'm gonna read out pretty decent list for Johnson and her accomplishments as a boxer so far. She became the WIBA bantam champ. Then after that she became the IBF World Super Bantam champion. Goes down to regular bantamweight. She was fighting one weight class above where she became the IBF World Champion. Decides to go one weight class down to regular bantamweight. Um, and then and is currently the WBC and WBO and IBF World Champion. She goes down. I think I remember hearing like the reason she went down is because of that opportunity to fight for 3 belts at bantamweight. So she did the jump down in one weight class, and it paid off. She's now the, like I just listed out, WBC, IBF, and WBO World Champion at that weight class. Now I don't know exactly what the fuck is going on. I don't know if the WBA is like throwing their belt in there or what happened, because um Gale isn't a world champion, let alone for the WBA, and Johnson isn't either. Johnson isn't a WBA champion in the weight class. Yet it is stated in every promotion and everything related to the fight that it's for undisputed. So I haven't learned yet a lot about why it's for undisputed, despite none of these women being a WBA world champion. But my guess is just that, I don't know. I guess the belt is vacant. They said these two are the best women in the division. Might as well just throw it in there for undisputed. But with that being said, Gale's accomplishments are she became Canadian Super Bantamweight champion around her like seventh, eighth fight. Uh, and then she became the IBO world champion. Now that's up to you, Foos, if you guys consider the IBO to actually be an organization that can give someone world champion level status. I personally don't. I feel like it's more of like being IBO champ is like a interim title holder. That level. Like you're a contender level guy. Like if you're a champion of the IBO, you're a contender for the other belts. Is what I'm essentially saying, and that's the highest she's ever gotten, is becoming IBO world champion. And same thing. I just think I have a 70% chance for Johnson beating Gale. I just think the slight little advantages are the slight amount of fights, like the amount of fights she has over her, a little bit more experience being in the ring, but also like the caliber of fighters. Same thing in the previous fight that I was talking about. Johnson just has slightly higher caliber level of of opponents as opposed to the opponents Gale has fought. And she's been a world champion she's now two weight classes, and she's been unified in one of them. And, she already has that experience of being the world champion, being in pretty big fights. So this is nothing new to her as opposed to Gale. And Gale, as you can see by her record, has no fucking pop whatsoever. Elise Johnson has around almost like a 50% chance of knocking somebody out. It's a little less than 50%, but it's like right there. She has that pop, she has that experience, she has the style. I think she comfortably 70% chance, unanimous victory, 10 round. So, yeah. Moving on to the fifth fight. Now, this one's an interesting one, the battle of the fucking unks. Battle of the fucking UFC, ex-UFC champions. So, this is a match between two of Jake Paul's uh, biggest, some of like his biggest fights and victories. These as for those who may not know, Anderson Silva and Tyler Woodley fought Jake Paul. As a matter of fact, Woodley even fought him twice. But with that being said, Anderson Silva's boxing record is currently excuse me, it's currently at 3 fights. Two of them, he's won them by knockout, and he's lost another two. One of them being against Jake Paul, and then he has 0 draws. Who's facing off against Tyron Woodley, who's only had 2 fights in his career, and his boxing career. He's only had 2 fights that were at the professional level, and both of them were against Jake Paul. Now the KO could confuse you right there that I have right there written, but no, that's not for his victory. As I stated, he hasn't won a boxing fight. That KO is for one of his losses. As you guys know, the crazy fucking meme when he rematched Jake Paul and he got knocked the fuck out, and he was just memed all over the internet for a while. I have in question marks right here written before I get into their accomplishments. It's labeled as a cruiserweight fight. For those who don't know, the cruiserweight limit, like the weight for the cruiserweight, is 200 pounds. So a fighter cannot come above 200 pounds and consider himself a cruiserweight fighter. He has to be 200 pounds and below. But for some reason, the limit of this fight is 195. So I don't know what's going on with that. But whatever. It's considered a cruiserweight bout. Now, the accomplishments for Woodley stand at pretty much nothing. His only 2 fights are with Jake Paul, where he got memed because of the KO he fucking got on the rematch. And that was in 2021. His last fight where he got knocked the fuck out and he got memed was in 2021. So he hasn't fought since. And now he's fighting Silva tomorrow, on Friday, December 19th. So Silva's accolades are, in 1998, he made his first fight, his pro debut in boxing, and he lost it. He lost it against some random dude, Luis Teixeira. I believe that's how you pronounce it. This guy has nothing much. He just has a bunch of wins and a bunch of losses. Typical journeyman type of career. But yeah, Anderson lost to him. Didn't fight boxing. Obviously, MMA is his thing. But the second fight he had was in 2005 against some random dude again, and he KO'd him. So it was his first victory, and his first victory as a boxer was via KO. And then jump all the way to like 2021. He fights Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and he beats him pretty convincingly. I have like fade memories of that fight. I remember that fool fighting him and just, I don't know, it was embarrassing for Chavez Jr. This fool was completely dominating him. It was just embarrassing. But anyways, that was in 2021. And then in 2022, he proceeds to fight um, and beat Tito Ortiz, who's another like UFC uh, champion slash like UFC unk, and he beats him. And then that same year, later in the year, he fights Jake Paul, where then he loses to Jake Paul via decision, and he hasn't fought since. So Silva hasn't fought since 2022, and his last fight was against Jake Paul. Woodley hasn't fought since 2021 when he got knocked out by Jake Paul. So both fighters haven't fought around the same time, and the last opponent they had was the exact same opponent. So in that regard, it's kind of close. That's why I have it at a 60% chance. But I just think that overall, as a fighter, Sylvia is a little better than Woodley. And even in their boxing careers, you could see um, at least Sylvia has some victories over some guys like Tito Ortiz, ex world champion, although shitty and not deserving, but an ex world champion in Chavez Jr. And, but he hasn't fought since 2022. So both these guys are kind of around the same time, have been out around the same time. But I do have Silva as a slight edge. Like I said, hey, don't come at me. I'm not a big UFC fighter type of like watcher, but it's just overall I do see Silva as a better fighter overall than Woodley, and he has a better record boxing wise than him. So that's why I give the 60% chance for Silva. I do see this like going the distance for Silva victory, either split or unanimous. But if Woodley was to win, it would be by knockout. I think the only way that Woodley kind of wins this fight convincingly is if he knocks out uh, Anderson Silva. So for those, if that shit happens, don't come being like, "Oh, I told you," or "You were wrong," because I'm saying right here, I'm thinking for Woodley, if he could come out victorious, it would be by that. So keep that in mind. But 60% chance victory for Silva. Now moving on to the co-main event of the night. We have Alicia Baumgardner, who has 16 victories, 7 by KO, 1 defeat, and 0 losses, versus Leila Baudoin, or Baudoun, I don't know how to say that, sitting at 13 victories, 2 of those victories by knockout, 1 loss, and 0 draws. Now, Baumgardner does have a pretty extensive accomplishment in just 16 fights. So bear with me when I read them off. She first became WBC International Super Featherweight Champ. Then she became IBO and WBC Super Feather World Champion. Then she became IBO, IBF, and WBC World Champion for the Super Featherweight and the WBO. My fault. So she had 4 belts, but she wasn't undisputed because the IBO doesn't count. You know, if you change the IBO belt for the WBA belt, then it would be for undisputed. But she technically wasn't undisputed because she was missing the WBA belt, and instead of the WBA belt, she had the IBO belt. So those are 4 belts she has at the super featherweight. But like I said, I'm not too familiar with the politics as to why. But then she became the IBF and WBO world champion at the super featherweight, and same thing. Like I don't know what's the reason that she doesn't have 2 of those belts out of the 4 that I mentioned, but that's why it's a unified super featherweight world championship for 2 belts, which are the ones that she currently has, and defending the WBO's and the IBF's belt. So, with that being said, Baldon's accomplishments are the WBO International Super Featherweight, which she is has defended at least like 3 times or twice, I believe so, before getting this fight with Baumgardner. So yeah, uh, I mean, there's an interesting thing That's why I wrote it down right here. The interesting thing are the rules, the changing of the rules. Like I said earlier in the video, women's rules are different from men's rules in the sense that the maximum that they fight at is 10 rounds. The maximum a man fights at is 12 rounds. And the time for each round in men are 3 minutes, as opposed to women who fight at 2 minutes. So the longest a woman can fight at are 10 rounds for 2 minutes each round. But I don't know how they did it. I don't know what MVP or Jake Paul or whatever the sanctioning bodies did, but they allowed these two women to fight for these two belts with men rules, aka they're fighting for a scheduled 12 rounds, and each round is going to be 3 minutes, which I've always advocated that, they're trying to be safer for women, so that's why it's 10 rounds and 2 minutes. But hey, I've been in the gym with women. I love boxing, so I do go to the gym. I do spar around, and I have sparred growing up with women and, trained with women. They train in the same time as we do. When you go to the gym, the you already have the alarm, the buzzer for 3 minutes, and they train using that buzzer just like anybody else in the gym. So it's like they already trained for 3 minutes. I don't see a problem with them training, fighting for 3 minutes. If they already train for 3 minute rounds, why not fight for 3 minute rounds? At least one of them, either bump it up to 12 rounds, just like men, or keep it at 10 rounds is their maximum, but 3 minute rounds. But I think it was super cool that they were able to do both changes, meaning they upped it to 12 rounds and it's 3 minutes each round. But I do have Gardner sitting at a comfortable 70% chance of victory. I didn't write it down on accident, but that is what I feel is gonna happen. Gardner's been here before. Gardner's defended her championship belts many times already. She's fought contenders. She's fought world champion level fighters. You know, and she has power. She could hurt. She has power where like it takes a lot of punches for her to knock someone out, as opposed to just having that one punch knockout. But she has the skills and the abilities and the experience to put, belt to ass, put a beating on you so that those punches really start affecting you. And like, that's how she's able to get the knockouts. Most of her knockouts are because she's pummeled it and brutally beaten her fucking opponents to the point where they either got knocked out or they got stopped by the ref or their corners. So that's why I have Baumgartner at a 70% chance of favorite to be the victor. Now for the big bad main event, the reason everybody's tuning the fuck in tomorrow, Friday, December 19th, is Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua at a professional 8-round heavyweight bout. Now, Joshua is sitting right now at a current record before fighting at 28 victories, 24 of those victories coming by way of knockout, 4 losses, 2 of those losses, no, 1 of those losses are by knockout, and 3 of those losses, one of them was against Andy Ruiz, the other 2 was against Alexander Usyk, and the one that he lost by knockout was against Daniel Dubois, who was his last fight that he had back in September 21st of 2024 when they were fighting for the IBF World Championship title. But, then you have Jake Paul on the other side of the ring, in the other corner, sitting at 12 fights, 12 victory fights, 7 of those victories coming by way of knockout, 1 loss against Tommy Fury, and 0 draws. Now, starting with the longer list, we're going to start with the bigger and more respectable, rightfully so, boxer in Anthony Joshua. Before he even turned pro, he reached the highest level any amateur can dream of reaching. He became the gold champion in the Olympics. Then when he turned pro, in his 7th fight, he became WBC International Heavyweight Champ. Then he became, like, 2 fights later, he became WBC and Commonwealth Champ. For those who don't know, in England, it's a pretty big and respectable thing, especially for up and coming guys, and especially for guys who are promising, like Anthony Joshua being an Olympic gold medalist, to show early in their career that they're at the British level. So for those who don't know, the UK has two belts to kind of signify that you're the up and coming, like an up and coming guy and respectable guy in, you know, in England and in the UK and all that. They have two belts: the British champion. So if you're for Great Britain, the British Championship belt, and the Commonwealth belt. That's what it's called. It's a black belt that has rainbow. You've probably seen it a little, maybe. But, anyways, he became WBC International and Commonwealth champ. Then, like 2 fights later, he became WBC International and International champ, Commonwealth champ, and the British champ. So he held those three titles. And then the very next fight, after winning those titles, he became the IBF World Champion. Defended it a couple of times, I think like 4 or 5 fights. Then he became the IBF and IBO champion. Defended it like twice or 3 times. Then he became the IBO, IBF, and WBO champ. And he held those belts. Then he lost to Andy Ruiz. Then he won against Andy Ruiz, reclaiming those titles once again. Then he lost to Alexander Usyk. He then claims a rematch clause activation, and then he loses again. And then the next time he tried going for a world championship belt, like I said, was against Daniel Dubois in 2024, in September, where he was fighting for Daniel Dubois' IBF world championship belt, and he got knocked out, and he hasn't fought since. And this is the first time we're going to see him back in the ring since that devastating KO loss. Now, Jake's accomplishments, not trying to be fucking funny, but is nothing. He has nothing to show for 12 fights. He has nothing to show for all these years of boxing. The most I could give him a respect are three dudes. Is beating Tyrone Woodley, and then rematching him and knocking him out. Although, when you put into perspective that Tyrone Woodley in the second fight was how do you say exactly? He was a replacement match. Like Jake Paul, I don't know who he was meant to fight, but he was meant to fight someone else. And then, they needed a late replacement, and Woodley stepped in. So Woodley had, I think, like it was like 2.5 weeks of preparation for Jake Paul, and then he got knocked out. So I'm just saying, there's no surprise that the first time where Woodley had the same amount of time as Jake Paul, he didn't get knocked out. He just won. He just lost by points. And the second time they fought, he wasn't prepared, and all he had was like around 2 weeks to prepare for Jake Paul. He got knocked out. So that's all I'm saying. The other ones that I could mention that I guess I give him credit for are like Michael Perry. Michael Perry is more known as the bare knuckle guy. He's like the Conor McGregor of bare knuckle boxing. He's like the biggest guy at bare knuckle boxing. He's a champion, and he's a bad motherfucker and whatever. But it is boxing. It's still different from normal boxing, but it's more closer to the boxing we all know than a UFC fighter. A UFC fighter is not a boxer, and a bare knuckle boxer is still different from a bare knuckle. Like, a bare knuckle boxer is different from a regular boxer, but it's still closer. So that's why I give him that respect of and credibility of beating Michael Perry. And the other one, I guess I could include Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. But when you start to nitpick, not nitpick, but when you start to see between the lines more like it, then you start realizing it's not really that impressive. Julio Cesar hadn't fought in like 3-4 years. He had never fought at cruiserweight neither. He'd always been like a mediocre champion even before, you know, even before like retiring or the later rounds, later fights in his career, he was already getting mediocre. So it's like it was not really an impressive fight, but I guess you can add it that he beat an ex world champion and has that in his career. Now, going into the specifics of this fight, it's an 8 round fight. It is a professional fight. So for those thinking it's an exhibition or it's not a real fight, no, Jake Paul is like professional boxing career as well as Anthony Joshua's current like boxing career. Like when these guys retire and you look at their records, they will have each other in their records. So this is a real, actual, legitimate, sanctioned by the by Florida 8 round heavyweight fight. Uh, Now, typically when you fight, you know, when you fight for professional, you fight for 8 ounce gloves or 10 ounce gloves around there. But for this fight, we have a 12 ounce gloves. I'm pretty sure that was put because of Jake Paul's team. You know, wanting to be a little bit more safer. Uh, and also, for those who don't know, in the heavyweight, it's 210 or 215, I believe, is when you consider a heavyweight and above. So you could come in weighing 215 and fight a guy who's 295 pounds. That's just the heavyweight. But like I said, for Jake Paul, like a little help and advantage for Jake Paul, they stated that in the contract, Anthony Joshua cannot be above 245 pounds. So that's, I guess, a little bit of what other division fighters have to face when they have to make weight. Anthony Joshua, for the first time in his career, has to make weight in the sense that he can't pass a certain limit, which is 245 pounds. 99.99% chance of winning for Anthony Joshua. I know it's a joke. I view it as 100%, but boxing as well as life is just so unpredictable. It's just so, like, you just don't know what the fuck is gonna happen. One thing that just seems so sure could go crazy and out of the norm. So that's why I have the 0.01% for Jake. But yeah, realistically, I do not see this fight going past the first. At most, if Jake's, experience, if he could summon every ounce of experience, every ounce of training, every ounce of his ability, and he could, run and evade, I see this fight no passing no more than 2 rounds. And I'm one of those people that don't believe that this is ruining Joshua's legacy. But I am one of those people that does believe if this goes past the second round, that it is a hindering to Joshua's legacy. Like just taking the fight alone, to me, does not ruin his legacy, does not ruin what he's built up. But to me, Jake Paul surviving more than 2 rounds, fuck, like not even 2 rounds, like surviving more than Francis Ngannou. If he can't do the same thing that he did to Francis Ngannou, or even worse to Paul, then yeah, that is hindering his career. That is hindering his legacy. But I just don't see it possible, especially, for those who are saying, oh, it's rigged, these fights are rigged. In my opinion, Jake Paul's fights are not rigged. I'm not saying it's not possible that he could be like, hey, have a fight with me, you're going to win this amount of money, but only if you let me win. Or, hey, we're going to do this fight, but let me pay you this extra just to let me win. I don't see that as what's going on. I'm not saying there's not a possibility. I just don't think that's what's going on. What I do think is going on is that Jake Paul is a terrible boxer, but he is a natural and very, very talented and very good promoter. The reason people buy into these and even say it's scripted is because he really sells you the possibility that they could beat him, when in reality these guys have no reason to be in the ring with someone like Jake Paul. You guys got to remember, Jake Paul's a in his prime guy with millions of fucking dollars that he is investing in gym equipment, training, trainers, sparring partners, um, strength and conditioning coaches, even the machines of like for recovery, the machines for training, like he has no limits to what he can and can't have for a training camp. Like I said, he could pay top notch for good sparring partners, like top notch sparring partners that spar for training purposes with other champions, and Jake Paul could afford them, and even easier than the world champions because of the amount of money he has. So it's just like, oh, you don't think that Mike Tyson could? No, I don't think a 60-year-old guy who hasn't fought in 6 or 5 years, and all he's doing is just smoking weed and doing shrooms and stuff. And the last time he got in the ring was against like an also 50-year-old fucking um, Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. No, I don't think that the guy who's basically 60 years old and had a heart attack training, can beat Jake Paul. You know, and then people are like, oh, with the training videos. One thing is training. One thing is actual fighting. One thing is to hit the mitts with lightning speed, and then one thing is to try to do that against your opponent. It's not the same thing. Believe me, it's not the same thing. So that's what I think is the reason that a lot of people are like, oh, they're scared of this fight because like, oh, it's scripted. The reason I don't believe it's scripted is because, like how I just stated, I don't think his fights are scripted. I just think he's an excellent promoter at selling the illusion that maybe this person can beat me and that I'm in trouble. Like, oh, look at me, I'm in trouble now. I'm fighting a 6-year-old Mike Tyson, you know? But the reason also that I don't think that this is rigged and that Joshua's going to ruin or do anything to hinder his a very swift, easy victory is because of the potential fight versus Tyson Fury late 2026. Now, I know we've had these many rumors where it's like, oh, it's almost a done deal. It's basically almost made. But that was before Turki Al-Ashi came in. Turki Al-Ashi has the power, the experience, the money, the resources, and the credibility to make these stuff happen. And I believe he's going to make it happen, especially because he wants to make it happen. And he knows it's a mega fight even to this day, even though these two guys are at the end of their careers. It's still a mega fight that we all been dying to see for many years now. And I would argue that Joshua versus Fury in London or in Saudi Arabia is a much bigger fight than Joshua versus Jake Paul. I would beg, you know, like sue me, be mad at me, debate me if you guys want in the comments. I personally think Joshua versus Fury is a much bigger event on its own, let alone if they decide to stack the event with other great fights that are going to bring more eyes and more attention to the night of boxing. But them alone, Joshua versus Fury, I think is just more money and more people. And so why would you ruin that, especially at the late end of your career, when you're one fight away? For those who don't know, it's speculated and not speculated, but like between speculation and confirmed that they are gonna fight in 2026 at the end of 2026 around September, October, but that they both need a tuna fight. So they're both gonna have a tuna fight early in the year, around February, March, before they face each other. They just have to win those. So why would Joshua ruin by not being able to beat a guy who's nowhere near his accomplishments, nowhere near his level in terms of the opponents he's faced and won against? How can you not beat him? You know, or how? Why would Joshua decide, hey, you know what? I'm gonna take this a fuck ton of money, but I'm gonna risk having fuck ton of money. Like, no, take the fuck ton of money right now, beat the fuck out of Jake Paul, become a boxing hero, and beating the circus act of Jake Paul's boxing quote unquote career. Easiest fight of your life. Go do the tuna fight where you're gonna gain pretty decent. I would beg to differ that beating Jake Paul in a very fashion is gonna elevate the tuna fight more, let alone the Fury fight. I think that Joshua's gonna go into the tuna fight. Say if he didn't fight Paul and he had the tuna fight, it would have had like 60% excitement, let's say, in terms of the viewers wanting to watch him get back in the ring and then the money he was going to get. But if he knocks the fuck out of Jake Paul in under 2 rounds and it's devastating and it's brutal and he becomes the hero of boxing, that tuna fight is going to be way more exciting and more wanting to watch for the people and especially the casuals, which are the ones you want to draw in. So it's like, I don't see a possibility of it being rigged because they have that down the road, damn near guaranteed, of the biggest fight of his career or top three biggest fight of his career, especially at the end of his career where he's not going to be getting these fights anymore. And he's going to be winning a fuck ton of money, probably even more than the one he's winning against Jake Paul. So why not do it? You know? That's just my opinion. I don't think it's rigged. I think Joshua really has to come in here. I don't think Joshua is ruining his legacy or his career by taking the fight, but he will be ruining his legacy and his career if it goes past the second round, especially if it goes past and Joshua's trying. Like if Joshua's not trying, he's just messing around, which he's supposedly saying he's not gonna do, that he doesn't play with his food. But if he's actually trying and Jake Paul's actually trying and it goes past the second round, then that would be something that, in my opinion, is hindering Joshua's career and his legacy, and especially is going to hinder the fight with Fury. So, with that being said, I've yapped enough. Tune in for the fight tomorrow. Tune in from the very first fight to see if I'm wrong or not from the very first fight. Last time I did this, a video like this was for Lamont Roach versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz, where I was right about every single one of my predictions except for the Lamont and Pitbull. I had Lamont winning a little bit in favor, although I did say that if he does fight the style of Pitbull in his favor, that it's going to go pretty bad and Pitbull's going to get the opportunity to do some damage to him and even knock him out. And hey, he knocked him down. So I was almost at 100% prediction for that. So hopefully I could keep the streak of being right in my predictions with this undercard, from the very first fight all the way to the main event. And yeah, like I said, without being further ado, I've yapped enough. Hope you guys liked the video. Hope you guys subscribe if you're new. And I hope you guys check out my other videos. Let me know about those. And yeah, just tune into the fight December 19th, tomorrow, Friday. And God bless. Take care.